Hello everyone, this is Angela Lama and the topic I'm going to be presenting today is Midori, Grappa and the history of Johnnie Walker. So let's start with Midori. Midori, it is a sweet muskmelon flavored liquor with a distinctive green color. It is made from two fresh lemons, yubari and musk, which are exclusively sourced in Japan. The yubari comes from the Yubari city on North Island, where the soil is rich in volcanic ash, making it of high nutritional value. And the muskmelons are sourced from Aichi and Shizuoka provinces, south of Tokyo, famous for producing high-quality melons. At 21% volume, it has a pleasant taste without a brutal kick, and its distinctive green color brightens up any drink. Its light, subtle flavor means that it can be enjoyed as a suitor or as a part of cocktail, making it versatile and internationally renowned. The price of Midori melon liquor ranges from $17 to $24, depending on the countries. So, the history of Midori. It started as Hermes melon liquor in 1964, produced by Japanese distiller Suntory. After winning the IBA Cocktail Championship in Tokyo in the early 70s, it started to gain interest and popularity. However, it wasn't until 1978 when the drink was launched at a party at the famous nightclub Studio 54, attended by the stars of Saturday Night Fever in New York, which increased its popularity throughout the US and the world. As the first fruity liquor to enter the US market, it became as fashionable as the clubs it was served in, and it won numerous awards for its unique character, and it has since remained a bar staple in bars and clubs around the world. So the production process of Midori. The process starts in Yubari city, where they make a rich orange-colored pulp from the Yubari melons, and this pulp is frozen straight away to harness the fresh flavor, and it is ordered in by Suntory when there is a Midori production run. The frozen pulp is left in bags until it is completely defrosted before they begin the two important processes of Midori to create a Yubari infusion and a Yubari distillate. A neutral high-grade spirit is used for both the processes with no fermenting. They use an enzyme for the Yubari infusion to help break down the more fibrous pulp, and then add neutral spirit and some sugar. The Yubari distillate is made in a low pressure still to harness the fresh Yubari flavor. They put in the Yubari pulp, high-grade spirit, and water to produce a 59% ABV, rich tasting smooth distillate. The Yubari infusion and the Yubari distillate are then mixed with the muskmelon infusion made in Shizuoka, still at an ABV of 59%. The concentrate, which is by now a clear spirit with a slight orange hue, is kept refrigerated and sent to both Mexico and France, where the production process is completed. The concentrate is blended with cane sugar and Louis Royer 2-year-old brandy made in Cognac with local and Arran grapes, which is when the ABV is brought down to 20%. At this stage, they add the green food coloring to create the liquor's distinctive color, which matches the flesh of the muskmelon. Mexico produces about 80 to 85% of the world's Midori, while France produces the rest exclusively for the European market, including the UK. And Midori can be used in various kinds of cocktails, like Maharaja Martini, which is inspired by India, Shogun Assassin, inspired by Japanese, and the Mambo Italiano, Melon Maple Fleas, Midori Midtown Mousse, and the Honey Martini Dew, etc. Grappa. So, Grappa, it is an Italian-marked brandy made from the fermented skins, pips, and stalks left after grapes have been pressed to extract juice for winemaking. It is originated in Italy, and in the European Union, to be termed a grappa, a brandy must be distilled in Italy from Italian grape mass. Grappa is a distilled beverage. That means the mixture of grape pieces and alcohol is heated gently, allowing much of the mixture to evaporate and leaving a potent concentration. Today's grappa is about 40 to 45% alcohol. In Italy, grappa is mostly served as digestivo, which means after dinner drink, or in the morning with espresso to make a caffè corretto, which means corrected coffee as a kickstart to the day. Grappa is served either at room temperature or chilled in small glasses and served after the meal because Italians believe that it aids the digestion. It also makes a characterful cocktail. It costs $10 for a simple bottle to over $100 per bottle for a single fruit variety base. It is best stored in cool, dark place out of light and heat. They can last several years, though they will lose some of their fragrance as they age. Now, the history of grappa. The production process of grappa dates back to the work of the alchemist in the 12th century, but it seems that only in the 16th century grappa became even a liquor to drink. While the early grappa industry was ill-defined, the spirit soon solidified its own identity in the 18th century. Although the word grappa delineates from the Latin word for grapes, the term wasn't used until the 1950s. This was around the time that it made its way from being a poor man's drink to a highly coveted spirit. During the post-World War II economic bloom in Italy, the demand for country's fine cuisine began, with a historic and refined appeal that spoke to the culinary masterminds of younger nations. Italian flavors reached the global stage, while weaving its way into restaurants alongside dishes such as pasta and pizza. Grappa garnered popularity amongst those who prefer the discerning notes of a truly established drink. The production process of grappa. Grappa is distilled from the fermented, moist squashed grape skins called pomace or vinacia left after pressing for winemaking. It's important that the pomace is fermented while still moist. Once the juice has been extracted from the winemaking process, pomace from white grapes varieties is taken to the distillery and left to ferment. The alcohol contained from red varieties is sufficient for distillation and so does not require further fermentation. At this stage, the red pomace is around 4% ABV and the white around 2.5% ABV. The pomace is stored in silos which are covered to retain its moisture and reduce oxidation. The pomace is then processed to remove larger stalks and wood before being transferred to the still. Distillation extracts alcohol from the pomace and concentrates the alcohol. The pomace is distilled solid without water. And there are two types of still that are used for grappa production: continuous using a disalcoholator and discontinuous or batch distillation. Continuous grappa distillation takes place in two stages. The first being in a disalcoholator, the apparatus uses steam to strip the pomace and produce phlegma, a raw alcohol at 15 to 20% ABV. The phlegma is then distilled using continuous column distillation apparatus to produce grappa at 80 to 86% ABV. Discontinuous or batch distillation uses alembic small steam boilers which must be filled and emptied one batch at a time. Steam injected through the base rises to the pomace, stripping it of alcohol. The newly distilled grappa is usually rested in vats and allowed to marry for 6 months. Unaged grappa is then hydrated prior to bottling to reduce the strength to 40 to 45% ABV. Aged grappa is matured in casks made of oak or from other woods such as acacia, ash, and cherry. The grappa can be used in various kinds of cocktails like affogato cocktail, grapparita, Italian milk punch, and grappuccino. So let's talk about the history of Johnnie Walker. Johnnie Walker whiskey, it is one of the oldest and most sold blended Scotch whiskey around the world, with its annual sales going over 130 million bottles per year. The brand came into existence when Johnnie Walker, an ordinary Scottish grocer, started his business in Ayrshire, Scotland. He used malts to make his whiskey tastier and found a new blended whiskey named as Walker Kilmarnock whiskey, which got acceptance all over the province pretty fast. After his death in 1857, his son Alexander took over the business and introduced the first commercial whiskey blend to the world, naming it the Old Highland Whiskey. With the introduction of railways during the Industrial Revolution, the small town allowed transport of goods to ships that were sailing to all the corners of the world. Alexander saw this as a great opportunity to sell the whiskey globally and embarked on the venture of making the franchise renowned all over the world. Soon, Alexander began using the famous square bottle to reduce breakages and made sure much more of his whiskey arrived intact at its destination. He also added the distinctive label slanted at precisely 20 degrees to make it stand out further from the crowd. Alexander was succeeded by his sons Alexander II, a master blender, and George, a master businessman. They took the brand to exceeding heights of popularity and fame, making Johnnie Walker one of the oldest and most acclaimed blended whiskey franchises throughout the world today. In 1909, Alexander and George renamed their successful new range of whiskies after the colors of their distinctive labels. Johnnie Walker Red Label and Johnnie Walker Black Label were born. It was around this time that the leading young illustrator of the day, Tom Brown, sketched an idea for a logo on the back of a menu during lunch. Alexander and George adopted the striding man immediately. At the stroke, John Walker, the Victorian grocer, became Johnnie Walker, the Edwardian dandy. By 1920, Johnnie Walker whiskey was in 120 countries. On 1st January 1934, John Walker and Sons was granted a royal warrant by King George V to supply whiskey to the royal household. By the end of the 20th century, the pioneering Johnnie Walker Red Label and iconic Johnnie Walker Black Label had been joined by the pinnacle of blender's art, Johnnie Walker Blue Label, and still growing with the addition of Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve. Introduction of the Johnnie Walker whiskey. So Johnnie Walker whiskey is a blended Scotch whiskey originated in Scotland and is now sold globally. It is a blend of grain whiskies and a blend of malt whiskies from different distilleries. It can be sipped straight or on the rocks. All of them are enjoyable this way. There is also no need to be afraid of mixing some of these whiskies into cocktails. Johnnie Walker Red Label. It is a blend of 30 young single malt and grain whiskies, bottled at 40% ABV. It is their most affordable Scotch and is good for mixing into any Scotch cocktail. It costs around $23 to $25. Johnnie Walker Black Label. It is made of approximately 40 single malt and grain whiskies that are each aged at least 12 years. It contains 40% ABV and costs $30 to $33. Johnnie Walker Double Black Label is the full-bodied flavor of Double Black. Bottled at 40% ABV, it is extremely complex and including a fascinating mix of smoke with vanilla and dried fruits. It costs $42 to $45. Johnnie Walker Green Label. Bottled at 43% ABV, is a blend of just 4 malt whiskies and is at least 15 years old, extremely smooth and often described as honeyed. It also has notes of dried fruits. It costs $60 to $70. Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve. It is a blend of 15 whiskies. It is a very easy drinker that is simultaneously sweet and smooth. It costs $80 to $90. Johnnie Walker Platinum Label. It is a full-flavored blend of single malt and grain whiskies, each at least 18 years old, from hand-selected casks. It costs $190 to $210. Johnnie Walker Blue Label. Bottled at 40 to 43% ABV, it is filled with rare whiskies, many from distilleries that are now defunct. It is characterized by soft, sherry, honey, and vanilla contrasted by an intense dark chocolate pittiness. It costs $150 to $181. The production process of an Scotch whiskey. So the process starts with cereal. Cereals are high in starches, which need to be converted into soluble sugars in order to make alcohol. This happens naturally during germination, so hot water is added and the mixture warmed until the cereal thinks it is time to grow. This is called malting. The growing process is halted by drying the cereal in a kiln. Peat smoke is sometimes used to aid the drying and impart flavor. The cereal is then ground in a mill so that it can be mixed with water. Heated water is mixed in to extract the soluble sugars, after which the resulting hot sweet liquid is drawn off and allowed to cool. Yeast is added and then fermentation begins. This beer is then distilled twice to lower the water content and increase the concentration of alcohol and flavor. Distillation involves boiling the liquid in a large container called a still. This is usually made of copper. The product of the distillation process is transferred to specially treated oak casks to mature for a minimum of 3 years before it can be legally called as Scotch whiskey. It can be used to make various kinds of cocktails like old-fashioned whiskey, whiskey Bobby Burns, whiskey sour, whiskey Godfather, whiskey Rusty Nail, and many more. Thank you.